Have you ever came home from a rough night or came home from the weekend and promised yourself that you would never drink again, or you're not going out next weekend, but next weekend comes around and there you are out doing the exact same thing and the cycle repeats itself over and over again? Well, what if I told you that you and your willpower wasn't the problem? Rather, it was the system around you that was broken. Let me come to you as a guy who has had to stop drinking, who had to realise that it was actually not my willpower that needed to have the strength, but rather building a system and an environment around me that was going to allow me to successfully stop drinking. You see, I had to stop drinking simply because when I did, it was causing quite a lot of issues. I wasn't present with the people that I loved. I was unreliable when it came to plans. I usually ended up taking it too far. I was the guy who said he was going out for a couple and would have to get carried and put into bed. And this continued for 3 to 4 years. And unfortunately, when it came to drinking, it started to become not just drinking, but much more. Now, at the start of this year, it hasn't been long, but I decided that I wanted to show myself that, one, I didn't need it, and as well show others that it was okay to step away from the 20-year-old lifestyle, which is going out partying and being wrapped up in that kind of party culture. I wanted more, and I wanted to chase more, and I wanted to fulfill myself, but I realized that a lot of my problems were unfortunately rooted in my relationship with alcohol. So I want to talk to you today about why, if you're in the same boat, making sure that you understand what's actually going on around you as well as within you, to allow yourself first to understand what you're feeling, why you're feeling it, and then knowing what to do and how to control how you feel by external things to create the easiest way to do this. Because I think it's so easy to get sucked into this, but if you know that you want more from life, and you know that currently the life you're living and the people you're surrounding yourself with aren't them people, then this is what I want to give you. I want to give you a bit more control back, but that starts with awareness. So that leads me on to willpower. So willpower is an interesting one because, of course, we think that it's so easy to stop something. It's like, oh well, if you do it, just stop it. You know, it wasn't until I started actually smoking that I used to tell people, I was like, oh yeah, I can just quit at any time. But actually, when I realized that I was addicted, it was this thing of like, something would happen, or you would walk past someone with a cigarette and instantly you would, oh, I'd love a smoke. And then it's as easy as, you know, you see the sun's out and it's scorching weather, which is rare for myself in Scotland, and instantly you're like, oh, I'd love a pint. Like, sun's out, let's go, let's go to a beer garden, have a few, let's have a good, I don't care if there's work tomorrow. And that's so easy done. But yeah, there's this interesting study done back in 1998, and it looked at how willpower is measured, and is willpower the thing that allows us to control whether we do something or whether we don't. And the researchers took a group of people and they got them to basically sit in front of cookies, and then I think there was one control group that was told, okay, you're allowed to eat the cookies and then do the test, and then there was another group that was told, okay, you're not allowed to eat the cookies, and then they had to do the test as well. And the most interesting part of it was that they found that those that had to resist the cookies actually ended up doing worse on the test. And that was really interesting because it showed that actually willpower was then somewhat like a battery, where the more we use it, the more depleted it is, and therefore the weaker it is. And it was interesting reading this because I know so many times before when, say at the start of me just not drinking, or times I've tried to stop drinking loads of times, and I remember so often it would be me going, no, you don't want to drink, you don't want to drink, you don't want a bottle of wine. And it would just be like this kind of Groundhog Day conversation with myself about not having it. And the reality of it was that I was gonna do it because I was constantly thinking about it. But the more I thought about that, and the harder I made it for myself, and the more I had to get myself, the more I had to get myself out of that conversation, the more my willpower was going to go down. To usually, and when I would relapse, it would be after weeks of telling myself I'm not drinking and absolutely fighting with it, and it would be something as small as a video, or I mean, it would go, oh come on, it's Thingy's birthday, you might as well have one, and that would be me, and that's me just straight back on the sauce. And I tell you now, it's not like I'm, once I was drinking, I kind of let myself off the hook. It wasn't there like I was sitting drinking in shame. I wasn't. I was like, oh, thank God. I love a drink. And I would just enjoy it, and I would be back out, and I would be going back to my wild self. And, I would have them conversations with myself like, oh yeah, I'll just have a couple. And it wouldn't. It was never a couple. So actually, when we look at what willpower is, if it's a battery that depletes, then we need to make sure that we're not depleting it so quickly that when the actual real test comes, that we're already nearly out. And that's just going to think, it isn't your fault. Actually, it's much more complicated than that, and usually it's based on your surroundings, which leads me on to my next point: making sure that you control your environment surrounding drinking. So when I say about the battery, of course, if you go through the first half of your day and you've spent the whole day trying to fight not to have a drink, then by the time lunchtime rolls about, you are exhausted, simply just because you've been fighting that urge and using that willpower battery. So what can we do to help us not have to use so much of that battery early on in the week or early on in the day? So of course we can look at interesting habit writers such as James Clear, who writes about how we can control our environment and allow our environment to help influence our way of thinking. There was this interesting study that he spoke about where there was they put water bottles into the canteen, and people's water drinking habits suddenly increased, and that was just by simply controlling the environment. If there's a fruit and veg bowl or a fruit bowl on the table, then you're much more likely to eat the food rather than store it in the bottom of the cupboard, where funny enough mine is. And what we need to then do is, have a bit of awareness surrounding where can you look at your week and think, okay, that's going to be a test for me, that's going to make me want to drink. If your usual cooking habit is to come home and have a couple of glasses of wine, which was a favourite of mine while making dinner, then that, dinner is going to be the hardest thing. So what can I do? Well, maybe not going to the shop before you get dinner, maybe doing a weekly shop, and rather than doing a daily shop where you can pick up a bottle of wine each day, is going to help that. And small changes like that, it is going to be these 1% changes that allow us to create an environment that isn't going to tempt us. And I think one of the biggest things for me was, I can't go to the pub with my friends anymore, and I attached seeing my friends with only the pub, rather than being like, well, I can see my friends at a coffee house, or I can go ask them to come for a run or a gym session, rather than putting myself in a position where I'm 10 times more likely to trip and drink than if I'm at the gym. And I think when I speak about attaching our environment to certain cues that lead us to drink, I also think about the emotions that can be attached to drink. I don't know about you, but I allowed drink to first come into my life as a way of having fun. You just hit 18 and suddenly everyone's allowed to go out clubbing, and suddenly that was kind of the thing to do. Everyone's going out the weekend, you're going to the club, there's big groups, and I realised quickly I quite enjoyed drinking. It made me more outgoing, more confident, And to be honest with you, I think it takes a lot now to see that I probably wasn't funnier than I thought I was. I wasn't funnier. I wasn't slicker. I didn't flirt better. I probably just made a bit more of a dick out of myself, but I just didn't know about it. But actually, I had attached what was started off as fun, then became relief in some things, and I attached certain emotions and certain states of being to drinking. There was this interesting research in 2008 called The Dark Side of Addiction, and it followed people that drank, and it found that people who had started drinking for fun then ended up drinking for escape and relief and release from different emotions. And how what started off as a good-willed notion of, oh, I'll go out with my friends and have a drink, was suddenly, oh, I'm actually going to go out because I'm feeling a bit stressed with work, or I'm maybe a bit anxious and need a bit of confidence, or I'm just feeling a bit lonely, so when I have a drink it's easier to talk to strangers I don't know and strike up a conversation. And it was weird because me being a 24-year-old, you're used to walking into a pub and it's people on their own. They're usually older gentlemen who have retired, but I would happily join them. I would come straight up, and if I'd had a few pints, and just sit with them and get them to tell me stories, and I wouldn't have to be with my mates. I just had to be on my own, and I would love going into the pub on my own, simply just to chat to these guys and get to know them and hear their stories and play a bit of pool with them. And I realised that I had attached so much of who I wanted to be that to only being able to get it through alcohol, and also my certain escapes, such as coming home from a stressful day. I had attached relief and decompressing from work with a couple of glasses or a bottle of wine after dinner or with dinner, and that was dangerous. And I fought this for ages. But I digress. What does this look like for you? This maybe is a case of you're completely sick of drinking. You're done with it. You realize that there's so many negative inputs that it's putting on your life and it's stopping you in so many ways. Or it's the case that you realize that, look, it could go this way. You don't want to cut out drinking altogether, but you really do want to cut back because you're a bit scared of where it might go. And either way, I want to meet you where you're at. This is about progress, not being abstinent. It's about making sure that there is no right answer for this. This is simply about making sure that you can have the most fulfilled life. Unfortunately for me, that meant abstinence because I had shown myself that I couldn't control it. And I am going to revisit that at the end of the year. However, I will make sure that you're updated with this and make sure that if I fall, then I have to put myself on the chopping block. And this is where you have to be really real with yourself and have awareness. Look at where you're tripping up. Look at what is the effect of this. I think the first step in anything is realizing that there is an issue. So let's look at that. Let's give yourself small steps. If you're drinking 5 days a week, then, or 7 days a week even, like my dad, if you're drinking 7 days a week, then going down to 5 isn't going to be an issue. That's progress. That's phenomenal progress. If you're drinking, say a Saturday, a Sunday, and a society night on a Wednesday, and you're thinking, oh, this is killing me because of all my study sessions, cutting out the Sunday drinking and going home early on a Saturday night, that's still progress. Do not think that this is an all or nothing thing, but rather it's about making sure that you give yourself credit where it's due. And that's the main thing. There was another thing James Clear touched on, which was every action we take is one step closer to becoming who we want to be. And he spoke about how if you want to be a writer, you just have to write. If you want to be a runner, guess what? You have to run. It's more about putting the reps in. And if you then say that and vocalize that and let it become who you are, then it makes it much easier, rather than, I think, again, when I would relapse, it would be someone would say, oh, yeah, having the drink. Oh, no, I've stopped for a bit. But actually it's much easier now if I say no, I don't drink. And usually it does get a bit of a scoff, and someone will turn around and go, why? And at which point I'll just be like, oh, just I don't. Or if it's not such an awkward answer, I'll think of something. But what I would say is the more that you place it in who you are, oh, I don't drink because insert reason, and make sure that you don't let drinking become who you are. Don't do what I had done, which was say, oh, I only can be confident and outgoing and this slick guy when I'm drinking. Rather, making sure that I was graceful in myself, saying, oh, I am these things anyway. Over the next couple of weeks, I'm going to be exploring different topics and different things that I know from experience can be a challenge and a battle for some people. And I want you to join me in this. I want this to be a community where it's real, that we can be there for each other and that we can talk about it. And I also want a way for me, even not through video, to help you through this and to help you through recovering the best parts of yourself, so you can be the person that you want to be, and also the person that your younger self would have been proud of. So in the description I will leave my 30 ways in 30 days to find that lost part of yourself. And yeah, let me know what you think. I'll be there every day sending you a message to remind you. But thank you for joining us. I look forward to the next video.